Good morning, and can I offer a warm welcome to everyone who's watching this site, a YouTube channel that's been put together for the Worshipful company and Hackney Carriage drivers by one of our court assistants, Mr. Dan Heath. It's been set up so we can share knowledge with our members and the wider public and the wider trade. And if you are watching this, it is very nice to have your company. What I'd like to talk about today is the history of the cab trade or the licensed taxi trade, what some of our dates, where we started and where we come from in history, and the similarities between another of the city companies, not a livery company, a company without livery, namely the watermen and lightermen of the River Thames. The watermen, for instance, their motto, a commandment of our superiors and the Hackney Carriage drivers with knowledge we serve, can loosely be connected by the way that we ply our trades. For instance, the watermen are masters of the docks, piers, quays, tributaries and wharfs and the whole of the river, as well as being knowledgeable to the highest degree on the currents and tides. Hackney Carriage drivers have to be able to do this on land, being able to navigate the streets, roads, lanes and alleyways, along with the buildings and points of interest on them. So very similar so far. Then we have the badge and bills. Taxi drivers' licences are numbered and we wear a metal badge. Exactly the same as the waterman, and there is some suggestion that our system of numbering came from the wherrymen that plied their trade on the River Thames. Now, a wherry and a ferry, a wherry, W-H-E-R-R-Y, is something that can go all along the river, dock at any of the stairs, any of the ports, any of the wharves, where a ferry would go in a straight line from A to B. So where did it all start for the Hackney Carriage drivers, and what is a Hackney? The Worshipful company of Hackney Carriage drivers are the 104th of the city livery companies, recognised by the City of London Corporation in 1990 and granted livery in February 2004. On the 3rd of April 2013, we were presented with our Royal Charter by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales at a service held in St Bartholomew the Great, our livery church. Our letters patent and the charter can still be seen there, and they were presented to our then master, past master Graham Woodhouse. Hackney. Hackney is a breed of horse, dapple grey, Flemish in origin, bred for its rhythmic walking style, giving a smooth ride, very similar to the Arabic horses much favoured by the Moors and introduced after the Norman conquest. The name was corrupted sometime around the 14th century to Hackney. Over the time, this term has been used to mean firstly the horse-drawn carriage, the horse, and then ultimately the motorised taxi cab of today. Coaches as a mode of transport were really introduced in the reign of Elizabeth I. It was only a matter of time before the idea was born that this was a good form of transport for passengers and goods. The cost of owning a carriage was prohibitive for many, so when new ones were purchased, older ones would be rented out to supplement the cost. Stablemen and footmen would rent these carriages for their employers to ply for hire in the inns and taverns, eventually cluttering up the streets to such a degree that they became what was said more than a nuisance. Nothing changes, some might say. This method of working was commonplace until 1636, when an old seafarer by the name of Captain Bailey came up with a revolutionary idea. He commissioned 4 carriages, dressed the coachman in livery or uniform, issued them with set fares and stood them one behind the other in the maypole just on the Strand, around the area of St Clement Danes and St Mary le Strand, just west of Temple Bar. What a choice location, focal point of the parish, the spot where proclamations, newsletters were posted, therefore a place where people would gather. Other coachmen tried to join these ranks but were forced to drive slowly up and down the area, eventually joining when a gap appeared. Greatly received by the public, who found it easier to get a coach, but this infuriated the watermen. After all, they'd been the main form of transport along the river, and now these Hackney coachmen had come to, and interrupted their trade. At this time, it would appear that there existed 2 types of coachmen, The ones standing in their coaches in the inns and eventually joining the ranks became known as the ancients, developing through time a two-tier license system, very similar to the one we have today. The second, the owners of the coaches, merchants and shopkeepers who hired out their coaches to gain some extra income, could loosely be described or developed into the private hire that we have today. The two trades run parallel for many years, but eventually Charles I was petitioned to regulate the trade by the ancients. Even with offers of payment to the exchequer, he did nothing. After the Civil War, Oliver Cromwell granted legislation to provide the setting up in 1654 of the Fellowship of Hackney Coachmen. By September 1656, these regulations were suspended, leading into chaos. By 1694, licences was reintroduced for 400 drivers. Since then, this has been uninterrupted, continuous licensing, making the London taxi trade the oldest regulated land transport system in the world. Our bill comes from the original area from which we were allowed to apply for hire, the bills of mortality. The records of births, deaths and marriages, the parishes adjacent to the city, which were required to return such records. These areas included Southwark, Shoreditch, Holborn and Clerkenwell. Drivers were not obliged at this time to drive outside those areas. By 1829, new lighter vehicles were being introduced that only needed one horse. These were known as cabriolets, from which the term cab is derived. Overall control of the trade was given to the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police in 1843. The Hackney Carriage Act of this year stated that all drivers of coaches and cabs had to be licensed, along with this being required to wear and display a metal badge and a number clearly visible while at work. Also, when appearing as a witness or the accused in court, the Act also made provision for the setting up of the Public Carriage Office. So the exam we take, the knowledge of London, the exam every licensed taxi driver has to take, as we know it today, was introduced in 1851 at the time of the Great Exhibition, that massive show in Kensington, the idea of Prince Albert and the architect of the day, Sir Joseph Paxton. People need to be transported around a city from new railway terminuses to this fantastic show. Routes were introduced across the capital, incorporating roads, buildings, points of interest in a radius of 6 miles from Trafalgar Square, the metropolitan boundary at that time, this being the centre point for measurements to and from the capital. Today that means learning in the knowledge test 26,000 roads and approximately 100,000 points of interest. There have been many changes to our trade. The first horseless cab was introduced in 1897. Electric, and in 1903 the first petrol engine taxi was on our streets. The last horse-drawn taxi licensed in 1947. So we've now gone full circle and we have new electric taxis for the last 2 years on the streets of our city. Now, this is just a quick presentation and I hope you've enjoyed it, and it would be great to see you more and more of you join this site as the site progresses. This is just the start, so hopefully we'll see you again, and hopefully this lockdown won't last too long.